Start and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery, returning to the space station, paving the way for future missions beyond.
You know, there are American heroes who don't like this idea. Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan have both testified against commercial spaceflight in the way that you're developing it, and I wonder what you think of that.
I was very sad to see that because those guys are, those guys are heroes of mine, so it's really tough.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, a quick question. Can everybody hear me well? Is the sound good? So please, if so, let me know in the chat. That sounds great. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Again, welcome to another RevelX Innovation webinar, and welcome to our RevelX studio. My name is Rob Nouwens. I'm head of sales of RevelX, and with me today are Erik de Groot and Matthijs Rosman. Erik is founder of RevelX. Matthijs is partner of RevelX, and together they have more than 50 years of experience in helping customers with their growth and innovation challenges. They also are a kind of a mentor for several startups, and they invest in several startups. So we do have a lot of experience on the table right now. And what they did last year, they have written a book called Dare, the mindset for successful innovators in the digital age. So it is about innovators, and this is the topic of today. So we will cover this in this webinar of today, and we will do that in a kind of an interactive modus. So we instead of overwhelming you with a lot of boring slides, we created an interview setup for today, and we would like to have your input as well and to make it as interactive as possible. So we will introduce some polls for you just to see your reaction on certain questions we have for you during this hour. So let me first of all start with one poll just to see how innovative the audience is, you as a participant. So if you look at the right side of your screen, there will be an poll appearing, and we have 18-20 answers.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, a first quick reaction from your side. What does this say?
Yeah, so a lot of innovators in the room, so that's good. Hopefully inspired by our book. So be interesting to hear your experiences and your questions and whatever you want to discuss with us. So please share your questions in the chat so we can address them. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Great.
Yeah.
And I hope we can turn around to the one person that says no idea.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And two people who need to know what's
That will be the challenge of today.
Okay, let me start with the first question. We talk a lot about innovation, and we help customers a lot about on innovation challenges they have. But during these times, especially during these times, Matthijs, maybe you can answer this. Isn't innovation not just a hype?
Isn't it a hype? Well, I would say it's never been more important. So no, it's not a hype. I think what we're seeing today, and especially the curveball that COVID-19 has thrown at us, is we live in an age of what we call autocatalytic change, which is sort of a difficult word for saying that the changes that we're experiencing and seeing in both our daily lives as well as in our businesses are sort of accelerating the next. So keeping up and adapting to that new environment is more and more important. So I'd say it's of key relevance in this day and age. And I think it's also important to note that innovation is sort of come out of the realm of just product innovation, right? So maybe in the last decade when we spoke about innovation, it was just about new products and features, but now it's much more about the entire business model. So when we work on innovation, we work on brands, we work on customer experience, we work on platforms, new service and revenue models for businesses. So and those are key to keep up in this day and age. So I would say it's a necessity. It's not a nice to have. So it's not a hype. And especially now with COVID around, we're in a true crisis. And what we tend to say is, never waste a good crisis. So use this crisis to up your innovation game, and we truly believe that the companies who do so will come out on top and will be the winners. So so no hype, it's a necessity. So
okay, that's clear. You choose with your book. You choose there, and you choose to write about and talk about the mindset. And we know you both are strategic consultants. So you might expect a kind of a new methodology or a new model, but you choose to write about mindset. Eric, why is that?
Yeah, that's a good question, of course, especially for us. Well, to be honest, there are so many of those books around. There are plenty of them sitting on the bookshelf, gathering dust. And many of those models and checklists are actually not new. So, and you can easily get them for free from the internet. So why write a book then about it? By the way, actually, we put a lot of those checklists and models also on the internet on our own website in the Grove Warehouse. Mm-hmm. But despite all those books and all those models, especially over the last decade that we have seen, the innovation practice in a lot of companies is still rather poor. So why is that? In our experience, there is just a big piece of the puzzle missing in that, more technocratic way of looking at innovation, which is the more human side of it. Mm-hmm. And also a tour around our customers and relations confirmed that finding. So the key of success is actually it's you and me, Rob. It's our mindset, it's our behavior, and it's our way of working. And that's really makes the difference. And our own innovation readiness benchmark confirmed that on a more empirical evidence that 7 out of 10 respondents, and say it's about 150 companies now already, Matthijs.
Yeah, a little over, I guess.
Yeah, and that find their innovation skills are below par. So we have some empirical evidence there as well.
Okay. And we saw in the video, and there consists of 4 elements. There's defiance, adventure, realism, and endurance. Why those 4, and why don't you choose for 2 elements or maybe 8 elements?
Or 10.
Or 10, whatever.
Yeah. I think we have a slide to represent that. So with DARE and the acronym DARE, we really wanted to show 2 slides of the innovation medal, 2 sides of the innovation medal. So the D and the A, defiance and adventure, really represent the element of what we call creative destruction, right? So you have to, in order to change yourself, in order to innovate, first you need to break down, let's say the current situation. You have to get creative. You have to, defiance really means that you start to question your own beliefs, and you stand up to them. So that's what defiance is about. Adventure is about the creative part, so about trying to find new answers. And it's not always about the eureka moment. Creativity also is a process. But so the D and the A really stands for the creative destruction part. So that's one side of the innovation medal. The other side of the innovation medal is that we are proponents and we truly believe that innovation in itself should be a value driver. And in order to drive value, obviously there needs to be a payoff somewhere. So when we talk about realism, we talk about data-backed experiments. It needs to hold true. It needs to go beyond just a good feeling in the belly. So it needs to be something more than just that. And the endurance in the end is about the stamina that organizations need to see innovation through. So innovation really is it should probably be a verb. It should be something that's hard work. So you need to execute well on innovation. And in the end, the word DARE, obviously in itself, we could actually say it's a 5th element, and that refers to just being daring, just to be out there and start doing stuff. So 4 elements, that's it.
And put yourself. Where do you put yourself in there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I tend to be more of a DA person, so I like to define and experiment and do new stuff. And especially the endurance part, the long haul is a bit outside of my comfort zone. So yeah.
Okay, and you, Eric?
Well, we're actually the same.
Okay. Okay.
That's a 9 months of writing process that we discovered that we are actually the same kind of person.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a nice side catch out of this entire process, that you get to know each other a bit better, even after we've been working together for 15 years. But
Okay. Now let's ask the audience the same question. So what we would like to do is we put 4 polls in the screen just to see how the audience is judging themselves on the DARE scale, so to say. So let's start with defiance. And the question is...
a rebel, good.
And to the next.
Let's see, we have 21 answers. We come back on the results later in this webinar. The second one, that is adventure. I often experiment to test my growth hypothesis.
Oh, really good. Yeah. Wow. I have my moments. That's a good one. Yeah.
All right. Then the third one. It is about
Realism.
realism.
Interesting stuff. Yeah.
And then the last one, it's about endurance. Here we go.
It's a nice mix of people. Huh?
Exactly.
Well, in the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay,
have a
that-
look later on.
We will come back on that later
Yeah.
on. But first of all, there and you know the 4 elements. Eric, where did you get the inspiration from?
Yeah. Well, in addition, what I just mentioned to our own observations, we have been inspired by a number of leading scientists, psychologists, neurologists, sociologists, from economics, the work. So, but let's focus on 3 people here, and we have slides to accompany that. This person is, I think, is very well known, and Daniel Kahneman is a Nobel laureate in economics. He's a psychologist. He's also a professor and a best-selling author of the book Thinking Fast and Slow. I think a lot of people have tried to read this, by the way. I also encountered a lot of people that were not able to finish it into the end.
It's a bit of a challenge.
It's a bit of a challenge. But the main essence that he taught us is that there are 2 modes of thinking and decision making. The system 1 decision makers, those are the ones that we have just seen, are the intuitive ones, the ones that make fast decisions, are more or less subconscious, automatic, and are pretty emotional sometimes. And system 2 is on the opposite of that. It's the rational one, the conscious. It's a bit slow, this part, and what he actually explains is that you should use both halves or both systems to make proper decisions. In our book, by the way, especially in chapter 8, we focus into that part of decision making. And from our experience, we see a lot of the more system 1s that are overwhelming in discussions about innovation instead of the system 2s, where we should listen more carefully to. The second person that was important for us is also, I think, very well known, is Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck is famous for her research on children and learning. And she developed, on the next slide, the growth mindset. This is a famous picture. I think it's also, we put it also in our book. And this is focusing on continuous learning, development. It's about training, hard work, and perseverance. And you probably might see here some resemblance in the DARE elements that you find in that growth mindset. And last but not least, maybe not that famous, Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl is an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist. By the way, he is not among us anymore. And in Man's Search of Meaning, his famous book, he shares his experiences as a prisoner and survivor of the Nazi extermination camps during the Second World War. He developed something that is called logotherapy. And he teaches us the importance of mindset to survive in a world of great uncertainty. And I think that is the world we are living in today, isn't it? And what he says is flexibility is key. So he says, actually, we cannot change the world around us. Well, some people try to do that, by the way. But we can change our attitude towards it. So it's the power of mindset and vision that allows us to endure those great trials that he actually did. Of course, he suffered a lot in those camps. And if you put that in perspective of today, I think a lot of companies are actually on the same trail here. So it's a way to survive.
Existential issues that arise and require a lot of flexibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Very inspirational. Let's look at the results from the audience, and maybe we can react on that.
Yeah.
On the defiance part, out of the 22 answers we got in.
It's actually quite interesting to see this since it's not particularly let's say it's not a trend. And whenever we do these sort of exercises and try to see what kind of people we are dealing with, either in projects or in these settings, we tend to see less rebels, but more adventurous. But
we have an extraordinary audience, I think, here.
I think so.
If we normally look at defiance, we see hardly any defiant in the room.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of guts to do that, of course, especially in corporate environments.
Yeah, and this one about adventure, I think, is also quite interesting. About 80% of you say that you're curious about testing your own growth hypotheses. If only this were true in our sort of in our business reality, because we just see so many people are just who try to stay on the beaten track, and those are the ones, especially. Well, actually, what we're experiencing nowadays is those are the ones who are in the most trouble. So it's good to see that that you are so curious, and maybe that's also why these people sort of decided to be in this webinar today.
I think we have some great innovators in the audience.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We'll sure follow up on that.
Yeah. But there's something else. I think the poll just say something else, and that is you cannot capture all the dare elements into one single person. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's true. It's I think it's always difficult to put people into boxes, obviously, but you tend to see that people they have a certain let's say aptitude for change, and and I think this slide represents it well. What we're looking for in innovation teams with our clients is a good combination of what we call hipsters, hackers, and hustlers. Where the hipsters obviously are the ones who tend to be more defiant, and they like to challenge the status quo. The hackers typically tend to be the people who actually run with the ideas of the hipsters and try to make something out of it, a product or a service or what have you. And ultimately, you need some hustlers. You need some people who actually make a business out of it. So they are the one who actually have to bring in the money. So this is ideally what we're trying to look for in a team. It's not let's say a one-on-one representation of the dare elements. But I think you're right. Innovation is a team effort. It requires different skills and different attitudes towards change. And for us, this is a helpful way of looking at it. And we try to challenge our innovation teams in this as well. Yeah.
Okay. So, but Eric, maybe if it cannot be captured in one person. Do you have to apply, it throughout the organization, or in parts of it?
Yeah, we get that question, by the way, quite a lot. When we wrote Dare, we interviewed a lot of CEOs on this as well, and I remember very vividly a discussion that I had with one of the CEOs of Philips, and he explained that since 2011 he was working very closely with a group of people on instilling a better mindset and competencies on the innovation, and did quite a lot. And I asked him actually, so what percentage of your people are now there at the level that you actually want them to be? And he said 15%. But he also said, well, the other 85%, it's not necessary to change them. So I said to him, why? And then he started thinking, and I said, well, are those people not inflicted by all those trends that we see around us, all the new technologies and their clients and whatever you have? So is it really possible not to adapt? I think the answer is no, of course, in that sense. And we came to the same conclusion. But there is a sort of a distinction that you can make in types of innovation. So we came to that conclusion as well. If you look at the more incremental stuff that you do as an organization, that often resides in the normal organization. It sits in product management, it's in marketing or other departments. But the more daring stuff, like business model innovation and disruptive innovation, that is often something that is probably better organized in a separate way. It is actually something that we call always a sort of a dual transformation, where the current needs to stay not only current but also develop, but it's more on an incremental pace, and the new has a completely different pace. It's a lot quicker. It's a lot faster, and in most cases, by the way, it's also the current that finances, of course, the new, which gives a lot of tensions, which a lot of our audience probably might recognize. But in the end of the day, this is always it's always bespoke. It's not that you can say, well, you need to do this or you need to do that. It's depending on the history and legacy of a company and the situation that it finds itself in.
Yeah. But if I listen to this answer, and is it just change management? What we're talking about here?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I think if we go back to your first question about the relevance of innovation in this day and age, I think it's sure innovation is about creating something new. It's about changing. It's about Eric just talked about dual transformation. It's about transforming a business. So that requires change management and sure the principles of change management they apply to innovation just as much as to any change in your organization. So and what we see, obviously, it starts with urgency. It starts to some sort of a, let's say, use your peripheral vision, try to see what's going on, and see if what that does to your business. And then it's about that's what we say. We created an innovation tribe or a coalition of the willing. Get some people together who are willing to change. A lot of innovation projects that we do or programs that we do, we don't engage the full organization. We engage those people who are actually willing to change or are willing to invest their time, but also maybe also their reputations on innovation projects. And there's also an innovation strategy that's required. So similar to change management also requires a strategy. So it's also about, so how are we going to pull this off? So we're going to reinvent ourselves. We're going to realign with our business situation, and that requires a bit of strategy, obviously, to see it through effectively. And in that sense, also nothing motivates more than some quick results. So some early successes. So when we work with teams on the innovation roadmaps, we'll also try to find out, so where are the sort of the quick wins, or where's the low-hanging fruit, where can we create a change quickly. But ultimately, it needs to be integrated back into the organization. So whatever you do, whatever you change, whatever you pull off as innovation feeds, it needs to become part of that, a running business, so that the dual transformation needs to get back together. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of resemblance between what we do in innovation and innovation management and change management. And the interesting observation is, and maybe you at the other side of the screen can comment on that as well, is that we see a lot of middle management that we have to deal with. That's often the roadblock in changing the organization and pulling off innovation projects. We haven't done any research in it, but from our experience, maybe it's about, they're afraid of challenging the status quo. They maybe are afraid of their jobs or careers, or just they have something to lose. I don't know. But I think today we don't have the luxury to block change. So it's better to embrace it and enjoy the ride. So so innovation has changed. So yeah.
Okay, and I've read your book as well, of course, and in addition to mindset, where we have talked about it this morning, there's another thing, and you have to adopt a new way of working, the so-called blended approach. Yeah. What is that? Can you explain that? What it is?
If I may.
Sure.
I think it also applies to that change management question, right? So. If you keep doing what you did, you will probably get the same outcome. So actually what we are, and I think we have this slide on this as well, we think that, apart from having the right mindset, obviously you need to equip people with the right skills and tools to pull off innovation. We like to, we like this model, which we developed, where we combine the principles of design thinking, lean startup, and agile. And I really want to stress that it's all about the principles, because no organization is alike, and And I don't think there's a blueprint that fits every organization, right? So, but if you look at these three models and consider their principles, if you look at design thinking, thinking really is about putting the customer first in innovation. And you have to resolve their pain points and address their needs first before you can do anything else. The principles between lean startup are really about failing forward, trying stuff, experimenting, building what we call minimum viable solutions. So not just products, but also services. Getting out there, putting them in front of the audience, learn and measure and launch new stuff. And ultimately, it's about an agile way of working. So obviously there are situations where let's say the traditional waterfall type of approach is still valid and suitable, but in many innovative environments, working in an iterative way is much better suited. So it's customer first, experiment fast, and do it in an agile way. And actually, those are the principles that we apply when working with our organization, with our clients. And again, it's a bespoke process, doesn't fit every organization in the same way. So, but these principles are the principles that we live by, and that we think people need to be successful in innovation.
Okay, that's clear. Let's turn back to the audience. We have a new poll, and you talked a little bit about the customer centricity part, and we would like to ask you another question, and that is about to what extent is the customer the main focus of your innovation initiatives? So, very curious about your answers. Yeah, there we go.
Wow. Again, I think it's a very interesting audience that we have.
No, it's
a bit outside of the norm.
Yeah. What is the norm normally?
Yeah. Well, what we tend to see is that many organizations, they tend to take technology as a starting point or whatever. Let's see if you take the matrix of what can I build and where do I see a need. What I can build and what I want to provide to the market is generally tends to be, let's say, the first port of call for innovation. So I think it's very encouraging to see with these people that they, especially the majority, puts the needs of the customers completely central. And obviously, I think that's the way to go. That's the way to innovate. But again, the reality is that so many innovation projects, they go to waste because there's just no customer for the solution. And the mantra of we'll build it and they will come still is very valid in many organizations. So good job to this audience, and very encouraging to see these results.
Okay, good. Eric, talk about culture. How important is it to adapt the culture or to the new way of work? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. What is culture then? Probably a lot of people would ask. What do you mean, culture? Let's not go there. I think culture is very important, of course. It is the fertilizer of what Matthijs just showed us of the new way of working. If you do not adapt some parts of your culture, then you will not be successful in this new way of working. So let's look at some of those elements here on that slide. We have to go from let's say that the left side is the more the traditional organization side. We have to go from control to a more empowered environment where people are more self-managing and you give control to others. We have to not only look at the individual, but we have to look at the team and the collaboration and building multidisciplinary teams and the ones that we have just shown you. It's not about long cycles anymore, which was in the traditional world quite okay. Yeah, we have seen new product development projects of 9 months or a year or so. We have to focus a lot more on shorter cycles, which gives a completely other dynamic in the organization. It's also not about sequential; it's more iterative, and which you have seen in in the circles and the way of in the way of working. Also, in the traditional world, especially in more industrial segments, there was always this mantra of first time right, and there is no room for failures. And of course, in the new world, we say no, experiment, but don't go all the way, but just do small experiments, test and have a tolerance to failure, which is a lot more constructive. And last but not least, which is of course not surprising, that management is not in the lead, but we have to accept that the customer is in the lead. Although sometimes we tend to think otherwise, but make no mistake there, the customer has no mercy, but there is room for failure. That's the good thing, of course. But in short, there's never one culture. I think in an organization, if we look closely, we always find separate subcultures in departments or other countries or disciplines, even age differences and generations. And culture is not static either. So it changes. It doesn't change a lot, but it does change. And some parts are more difficult to change than others. And what we see, by the way, also a lot of the times within corporations, that everybody thinks that, wow, working in an innovative environment or in a global, that's fantastic, it's and everything is possible. Empty pizza boxes on the Friday, and that kind of thing. But don't get me wrong here, an innovation culture is not always comfortable.
Yeah, not always comfortable. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you look at some of those elements of change, and let's take, for instance, failure. Failure is okay, but it is not a reason for incompetence. You just mentioned in the introduction that I'm actually sitting in the board of some of the startups and scale-ups, and we did a lot of mentoring. But especially in those environments, of startup environments, it can be quite merciless in terms of failure, in individual failure as an incompetence. Or let's take experimenting. Experimenting seems frivolous, but the way we experiment in corporates and in startups is actually very strict, and it's with a lot of discipline. So I think that there are always flip sides of that coin. And maybe a last one to address is something that's not maybe in this slide, but it has to do a lot of thing about leadership, or leadership versus management. I think also to be successful, a major condition is to have some sort of strong leadership. Well, look at the role models around us. The Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, all those people are actually very strong leaders. They're very committed. They're very visionary. And in that sense, they manage to also create a lot of followers. Sometimes even people adore those people. Well, then I will advise them to read the bios of Steve, and you will notice that there is also a flip side to that kind of leadership as well.
You bring in a new point that is about management and leadership. What exact role does management or leadership have in innovation? Matthijs, can you?
I think Eric already touched upon some of those elements, but to me, I think the key role of leadership is about providing air cover for innovative endeavors. I think they're always under a lot of stress, especially in established companies and environments. And leadership really needs to take on the role to protect, let's say, the seedling innovations and see them through to fruition. Thanks for putting this on the screen, Rob. Some of the things that Eric already pointed out. I think the role of leadership really is to have a vision. So what is how do we adapt ourselves to a new reality? What's our vision? What's our long-term strategy? How do we empower innovators within our organization? And like Eric said, sometimes it's a trying environment. It's not always comfortable, But if you have sort of passionate and fun-loving leadership, and they can provide let's say they can build engaging innovation teams. So the role of management and leadership really here is to provide that for the business. And also in our introduction, you talked about coaching and mentoring. I think a lot of the time there's a sort of a misnomer about that leadership and management is all about having the right answer. So we know all of the right stuff. And coaching and mentoring really is about, I don't know the answers, you don't know the answers, but if we work together, we can come up with the right decisions.
And ask the right questions.
And ask the right question. Yeah, exactly. I think it's quite interesting if you look at for example, the decision-making culture in Amazon. It's famous for asking questions. So if you come up with an idea and I have another opinion, I cannot just say, Rob, you're wrong. I just have to ask you a question. And if you cannot answer it, then it's up to us to come up with the right answer. So that's so it's quite interesting that you put that into the mix.
Yeah.
So it's about thinking and doing. Action orientation obviously is important. So if you don't get off the couch, nothing. If you don't change, nothing changes. I think that's a very obvious mantra. And it's about taking controllable risks, as I stated in the last statement. So it's if you try to go about it in a very, let's say, control-oriented way, then you're going to end up belly up. So if you have to take some risks, but you have to be controlled, obviously. So yeah, I think that the role of management leadership is really to facilitate and to lead innovation from a facilitating aspect. Yeah.
But at the other hand, if you talk about leadership, and we all, the balance between a long-term, short-term, a lot of leaders talk about innovation, about long-term strategy and the importance of that. They underline the importance for innovation, but at the same time, they're pushing really hard on short-term results, short-term performance, short-term metrics. So that's, how do you balance that out? And what is your advice, Eric, to such leaders?
Let me make I think there are two sides of this. Of course, there's always a short term. It's stupid to ignore that, especially during these times of crisis. And you have to act on that. But we are a little bit against there is this only default mechanism of management to only focus on that short term, especially nowadays where cash is king. I think the brave ones, or the ones that stand out, that we call, in fact, maybe leaders or entrepreneurs, are the ones that are also able to take advantage of the situation that they find themselves in. It was yesterday, I think it was in a discussion with a CEO, and he said, well, we just weather the storm, we just wait and see. The market is down by 40%, and we are down by 40% in turnover. But hey, man, that's okay because the market is down 40%. Yeah. And I said to him, hey, that's a bit weird because, to my opinion, you are a market leader. You're actually quite a big company. You have a lot of resources in terms of people, but also money at the bank. Why not take advantage of this specific situation? Why accept a 40% downturn? Why not, double down on the crisis and turn this thing around for you, and in terms of growth, but also in terms of innovation. So he actually, so the whole conversation flipped and went into a more opportunistic way of thinking. But of course, you need to have the resources. If you don't have the resources, if you don't have the people, and you don't have the money available, it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, talking about money, that's a good one, because innovation is costing a lot of money. Or is that not true? What is the thing about innovation and investments and costs and etc.?
Yeah, there are loads of books written about the cost of innovation. Yeah. Actually, I read an interesting article on LinkedIn the other day. I think innovation. We're advocates of small budgets in innovation, right? So
We still are.
we
We still are.
Yeah, we still are. Yeah, sure. But what you see a lot in corporate environments is, as opposed to startups, for example, startups, they tend to have smaller budgets, and they have to be creative with them. So innovation in a corporate environment usually revolves around having either large budgets or substantial budgets, and you're not fighting for your existence. But having being forced to work with a small budget is actually quite a good thing. So we are proponents of having maybe a 5,000 euro budget for an innovation rather than a 500,000 euro budget, because it helps you to make a good decision well. We see a lot of companies, they're throwing good money after bad because they're they just invested so much, and they don't have the courage to pull the plug. I think if you just spend a little bit of money and you take the principles out of lean startup, for example, as we just discussed, it's just losing just a little bit of money it makes it far easier to make a choice than losing a lot of money. And I think money is not the scarce item at the moment. Obviously we're in weird times and people are sort of frantic about where do I invest. But generally what we see is that with most of our clients is that they're not strapped for cash, and even if you don't have it on the bank, you can probably get it somewhere. But obviously you have to be aware that you need to be in a level playing field. We've been in situations where some of our clients try to compete with like large platforms like Rocket Internet, for example, and then you need a lot of money just to be able to compete. So just to play the game.
Yeah.
But in the end, I think innovation done well doesn't have to cost a lot of money, and actually drives value. And applying the principles that we just discussed de-risks that investment. So so go for less budget instead of more.
So good news.
Absolutely.
All right. Looking at the time, we would like to give you, the audience, the opportunity to. I have one more last poll for you. So we will start with that, and then we open up for questions from the audience. So
I have some. Right?
I think we already do have some questions. So we deep dive into that. But first of all, let's share the last poll, and that is actually about how often you innovated yourself this year. So let's see and wait. Answers will be.
We have a couple of jokers here. 3. How do you know? Again, we have a great audience. Very good.
0% nothing. That's good news.
Nothing. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Great. Any additional comments on that, or?
No, that's okay. Let's go to one of the questions.
Okay. I'm going to the chat, so please send in questions in the chat if you might have questions, of course. So the first question, Crystal, can you tell me something about the relation between the sense of urgency of change in companies and venture? So
I think we touched upon it a little bit already. So first of all, Crystal, thank you for the question. The relationship between sense of urgency and change. Obviously, as is with many sort of, I think, change endeavors, is that everybody wants to see change, but nobody wants to sort of commit to it. Very few people are willing to commit to it. And I think that a lot of companies today are seeing the urgency to change. And urgency obviously is a vital element to pull off innovation right. But other than that, we're also sort of advocating a stream of continuous innovation. So rather than just sort of getting into these hypes of intense innovation because you need to, I think we're much more looking for organizations who are actually trying to develop a culture of continuous innovation where they strive to make sure that they stay relevant over time, and relevant. I think innovation capabilities like a muscle. Like if you train it, it gets stronger, and if you stop training it, it gets weaker. So urgency is obviously an important element, but more important is to build the culture of continuous innovation.
Okay. I hope that answered the question right. Otherwise, I will see an additional comment in the chat.
Please.
Another question from Roland. Can innovation be disrupted like a new revolutionary method? I know the answer, but okay.
Innovation is continuous disruption.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say. So in itself, if you do this in this continuous fashion, and you always come back to that same question: are my presumptions of the world around me and of what we are doing within that world, are they still valid? Is it still relevant? And what might change that relevancy? So I would say it's more like a continuous process. And then, of course, we were talking not about the incremental stuff that we talked about earlier, but we talk about more the daring stuff like business model disruptions and or complete disruptions of your existence. Yes. Yes.
A big one. Yes.
But at the same time, so the word disruption comes up, and I think a lot of people look at disruption as something that's something that comes out of the blue, but disruption is a process. It's something that's predictable. If you look at many of the things that we see as predictable as disruptive, maybe not the COVID or at least there are some people who say they predicted this. But if you look at it in a business sense, many organizations which are disrupted, they tend not to see things that are obvious, right? So if you look at disruptors in any industry, they start to peck away at a business model at a level where an incumbent company doesn't go anymore because they're so focused on building new feature-rich products and trying to tend to the needs of their, let's say, most needy customers, and they lose out on the customer segment. So so it's not. I don't think there's anything revolutionary about disruption, and I think. And I would even say that don't disrupt an innovation process. Just go back to the basic principles of looking outside what's happening and look at your customers, look at what's around you, and what does that mean for me, and how do I adapt myself to that environment. So, yeah.
Okay, that's clear. Another one from Changu, if I pronounce that right. This is really an interesting one. Can innovation be taught, or are you born with it?
Well, what's also interesting is to take Isabella's question together with that, how you can cultivate the spirit of innovation to children. I think I'm a strong believer that innovation can be taught. But as we have shown you, there are those 4 key elements in innovation. And of course, there's also something within your character, your person, and the way, you've been educated and brought up by your parents, that strengthens maybe more the D or the A, like for instance with Matthijs and myself, or sometimes more the realist in you, or that you are more from the part of endurance. So yes, it can be taught. Actually, we do that often at companies. We organize growth academies with the whole curriculum inside, which is action-based learning. And if you come back to children, and the funny thing is, I think children, you do not need to cultivate the spirit of innovation to children. Children in themselves are very innovative. They are not hampered by like what we have in the grown-up world, dogmas, stigmas, norms, values. You need to do this or that, or you need to think this way. So in their early years, they're still free-spirited, and from that free spirit, a lot of new ideas. But also, just listen to your children and the questions that they ask. So Leonardo da Vinci needed to find an answer on the question, why is the sky blue? But my son of 6 asked the same question.
Yeah.
Actually, I still don't have the answer. But
But that's quite interesting. If you take this question and you tie it into the question you asked about leadership, if you look at your own leadership skills as a parent, how do you treat failure with your? Are you allowing your kids to experiment and let's say fail or experience, let's say the negative consequences of an experiment, or do you try to prevent them from experiencing those negative consequences? And I think as a parent, as a leader, you want in a controllable environment. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Let's limit the risks, but have your kids experience what it means to experiment and fail and find out and pivot. So I think it's a great metaphor.
Yeah.
there is, by the way, there's a great challenge in our education system there. I think that is still very old school, very much focused on gathering knowledge, which of course doesn't make any sense nowadays because we have it on our screens. Just Google it. So we need to refocus our whole education system in that sense, and work more along the lines of the DARE principles, and stimulate those elements.
Okay, let's go to the next one from Michael. Where do you see the gaps are in our knowledge of doing innovation effectively, all the way through to business impact?
I think the gaps, I don't know if they're gaps in knowledge or if they're just gaps in the way we do stuff. But I think the two, let's say the far ends of the DARE spectrum, let's say the defiance and the endurance end, those I think are the ones who are most vulnerable. So with defiance really is about, so how do I listen? Do I actually listen to customers? Do I take the customer signals into account when coming up with new innovation plays? Is one which I think many organizations overlook. It's not because they don't know, it's because it's not in their DNA. Maybe they don't know how to extract the right signals from the market. Sure, that could be a problem, and we see that many times, obviously. But also at the end stage when innovation needs to become part of the, let's say, the standing organization or the running business. Then obviously the handover goes too quickly, or that part of the process is sort of shortly handled, and in a sense there's just not enough awareness that it takes a lot of time to do that. So I think the vulnerabilities are at the far ends of the spectrum.
Okay, we have to be time conscious here. We almost reached the end of the webinar. Let's pick out one more question, and I think a question from Marjolein. Thank you for bringing in that question. So, who do you think should be responsible for building this culture of innovation, and who should execute?
Can we tie it to Laurent's question about the VP of innovation?
Yes.
Yeah. You read it?
Where's that one?
So Laurent says, in an organization, can a VP of innovation be the solution to handle the business development?
Right.
Should be strong.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe a short reflection on both the questions here. Well, a simple answer would be everybody is responsible, but that's of course not the case, because in a lot of organizations we have to be realistic, and not everybody needs to work in innovation or work with innovation. What we encounter most of the time is if top management, especially CEO, COO, is not really involved, is not walking the talk, then it's hard to become successful here. So it shouldn't be just a nice pastime or to do something next to the business. It should be in the middle of the business, and it should be driven by top management. And again, if not, we always come into difficult discussions about budgets, discussions about how important is it really for us? Discussions about, well, it's not very effective. I don't see the results. Where are the results? They always talk about short-term results, and those are typically questions and remarks that come across when it's not really on top of the minds of top management and sitting in the middle of the strategy.
Okay, it's 11 o'clock. We should wrap up this webinar and close it.
So many things to share.
So many things to share. Just thank you again for all the questions. We make sure we make a written document of the questions, and we will answer it in a document and send it back to you by email. So we will come back on your questions if we didn't cover the answers today. So one final one, just a very short answer. Will be a next there? Will there be a sequel on there? Yes.
We're thinking about it.
Working on it.
And working on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, thank you for watching this webinar. There is a handout available which you can download. And what I have to say again, thank you very much. Stay safe, and we hope to see you in our next innovation webinar. So and have a nice day.
Looking forward to our next book. Yeah, good.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
That's great.
Bye bye.
Thank you.